Okay, so today is the Ladies Sangha for January 29th, and we were going to be discussing the idea of thinking before speaking. This is a theme that was credited from our newsletter. Dear Kala came up with the concept of understanding how we are affected by what we hear and how we respond according to what we hear, how we process the information. So today we decided we'd try and do a podcast as opposed to a lecture where everybody sits and politely listens. It's going to be more of an opportunity for all of us to exchange, to contribute, to add to the conversation, and we'll see what it looks like when we get to the other side. I personally prepared a little kind of handout thingy that talks about, do you think before you speak? And I thought I would kind of go over the idea of what we're discussing. I did have a question for you, though, Kala. You had this as the Vaka Sutra or Sutta when you did
I
the
remember,
newsletter?
I remember I read there was this Vaka Sutra, it's called.
Okay,
But I think there's various of themes in Buddhism, and it's very long paragraphs, and it makes sense, all of it, but it's very mental and technical. It goes on the mental level. That's why I love the three gates, because it's so simple.
indeed, indeed. Would you mind reviewing the three gates for us? Do you feel comfortable on that?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just like you imagine before you approach something, and especially for me, I thought about this when I feel like I want to give advice or lecture people. We do that quite often, right? We see something and we think, I'm going to say something very righteous or necessary right now. Then before you do it, you can practice what we do with emotional integration. You can breathe. It's almost the same, but you can also choose, and I think it's Socrates which said it originally. You can imagine three gates in front of you. And before you say your message or what's on your mind, you go through these three gates. And the first gate is it true what you're saying right now? The second is it kind? And the third is it necessary? And if you cannot pass through all three gates, you should consider not speaking. It's the whole point of this. It's very simple, just like that.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, I went and looked it up. I could not find something titled Vaka Sutra, but I did find Vaka Sama, Samma.
It could easily be that I got a different, so I trust you.
Well, I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. I'm offering this back to you. We're saying there are several versions of this.
Exactly. There's
Um,
many.
hey, Maribel. Lovely. We'll get her joined up and let her know she's joining our podcast. Maribel.
And also that she can choose to be without video because we're recording, right?
Exactly, exactly. I don't know if you can hear us, Maribel. I wanted to let you know we're doing a little different format today. How are you doing today?
Hi. Fine, thank you.
Good,
I'm
good,
good.
good. We thought we would try doing this more like a podcast today. So we're going to be discussing the idea of thinking before speaking, but we're all going to be kind of exchanging and talking about it as opposed to one person lecturing and having a more rigid structure to it. So we're currently recording right now. You're welcome to keep your video on or off and participate to your desire, but I wanted to give you a heads up that we are recording. So you have a warning on that. Okay. As I was offering, I went out and did some more research on this idea. And the most modern version of this is think. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it informative or inspirational? Is it necessary? Is it kind? So we're talking about the idea of being mindful when we speak, when we contribute to a conversation. And the acronym THINK was created to help us find a fast way to run through whether or not what we are contributing to a conversation is of value and will be helpful as opposed to detrimental. So in that direction, many of us, myself included, we tend to listen to respond rather than to consciously and mindfully receive the information and honor what the other person is telling us. what they're sharing, what they're communicating to us, the opportunity to vibrate with another person's feelings, thoughts, emotions, to share their experience. And as a side note, women tend to do this much more deeply and easily than men. It's part of why men are from Mars and women are from Venus. We want our audience to share the experience. It's why it's important that we let them know what day it was, what time it was, what we were wearing, where we were, what we were eating, what we were doing, who we were talking to, which is all a great deal of extraneous stuff that most men are like, oh my God, is she ever going to get to the point? But we want the person that we're talking to share our experience. That's part of our nature as being a woman, being female. So we tend to do this more so and unconsciously so, but it also leads us to being saviors, which is our next one. We start thinking about the experience as being similar to ourselves when we're talking to someone. Oh, the same thing happened to me recently. When we do that, we're no longer sharing their story. We're waiting for the opportunity to share our story. We've shifted the attention over to ourselves. Another mindless way of responding to things. We also look at it from the point of view of, oh, I would have not done that. I'd have done it very differently. I'd have done this and this and this and this and this and this and this instead of that. Again, we're supplanting the other person. We're putting ourselves in their position without enough information. We weren't really there, and we've decided that we would have done it differently. Again, we're listening to respond. We're not present or conscious of what the other person is telling us. We're aware of what we want to say instead, and we're quite literally in our heads. So in that, we have the ancients observing this as much as anybody else does. And they came up with what we talked about just now, the Vaka principles. And this is part of the right way, the Buddha's right path. And underneath that, it speaks out as specifically, is it spoken in the right time? Is it spoken in truth? Is it spoken affectionately? Is it spoken beneficially? And is it spoken with a mind of goodwill? Are you intending to hurt somebody or try to help them? So it was an interesting thing to go back and look at how our ancient observations interpreted this behavior. That led us to the three gates, which, Maribel, you missed that part of it, but Kala contributed that to our newsletter this month. And under the three gates, it's proposed that you pass through three doorways or three gates before you speak. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So that shortened it down a little bit to the more concise bits of information that make your contribution to the conversation worthwhile. And then that takes us to the modern think. True, helpful, inspirational, necessary, kind. So that's kind of the history of what we're talking about. At this point, I want to hand it over and make this more of a group discussion, a conversation with regard to how each of us perceives this information, how we deal with it, and how we fix it when we realize we've done it again. So that's my contribution at this point. I'll hand it over to anyone else who would like to add their 2 cents worth.
I know Kyle's going to say, well, I'm going to wait till Ram, see what she says. So I'm going to see. I always find it very, very interesting, these gateways, because it's a bidirectional relationship, basically. It's when we are in the position of speaking, and then when we are in the position of receiving. So when you're speaking to somebody and you ask yourself these questions, is it true? Is it kind? And is it beneficial? Then it's all in your perception of, is it true? Is it kind? If it's beneficial? And that's what's interesting, because you can sit there and wait till the person asks you, what's your opinion about this? And it's very wise to do that, because the person that you're speaking to might, or that's speaking to you, might just want to not download, but like take off some information that they have, or share an emotion that is maybe too rough to be to handle. And so you know, we are taught to transmigrate at this point into the person that you know, that we're in relation with, not transmigrating in a violent fashion, not transmigrating without their consent, but just to sit there and to maybe to get the feeling of what they're trying to say. And so most of us, yes, if we're in that situation, we're more pushed to listen and then either say if something is true or something is kind or if something is beneficial. So, and sometimes when you're telling this or saying what you're meant to say or what you want to say because the person is asking you, it's on the receiver's end that's interesting also, because if you think that you're saying something kind because in your heart it's kind and in your heart it's beneficial, trueness is most probably, you know, there's three truths. So the trueness is something that, you know, you might perceive as being your truth.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it could be true and it could be true, kind and beneficial, or maybe just true and kind and beneficial, the person receiving it might not think that it's true, that it's kind and beneficial. So that's something that I enjoy looking at, that I enjoy observing, either be it with myself when I'm in that situation, either on the receiving end or on the giving end, and with regards to other people. Like with regards to other conversations, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at people conversing and you're saying, oh my God, you know, if I were on the receiving end, I wouldn't have liked this one, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, but I mean, it's beautiful as a relationship, because whatever we put out there circulates. So, and like you say often, Suki, we plant mustard seeds. So at this point, you know, if you tell me something that you find is true or beneficial or kind, that I might not like it because I'm not in that state of mind yet. But then in either an hour and half an hour or 2-3 days, I'll say, huh, you know, not necessarily she was right, but necessarily it made sense. So that's what I find. That's what I find interesting. And this is, you know, maybe between us that we're following this path, because we, you know, when we speak of transmigration, when we speak of the Buddha, we speak of, or even any wisdom, we speak of the wisdom that we're taught and that, you know, we experience. So once you're with somebody that does not have the same maybe path,
Mm-hmm.
or thinking, or it's also very different and sometimes very difficult.
Indeed. You bring up a good point. When I'm talking with somebody, I will say something that I think is a valid response or comment, and I'll register resistance. There's this reaction from the other person that might be physical, it might be emotional, it might be mental, but there's definitely this pullback from the person from what I've just said. And I realize, Melissa, you're sticking your foot in it again. You need to get back up, figure out how to back up. I'm learning how I can divert the conversation to something else if I've done that, if I see that reaction from someone, or contribute something else to it to try and make it less confrontational. But you're 100%. I hadn't given it that consideration, that it's not just somebody speaks, you speak, then it's done. It's a continuous living, passing back and forth, breathing experience between yourselves and the conversation. And how you respond to that is a very dynamic, fluid kind of dynamic science. This is your territory, Maribel. The math comes into this part of it.
And also it's interesting because I did this project in Christmas, right? I did it for a week with close-up family, and we are more fragile because we have all this roles we play. Everybody's intertwined with everybody.
Yeah.
And I actually had the same thoughts as Ram. And I was also observing myself, and I noticed sometimes what I said was true and necessary. But when I really, smelled it or took a deep breath and felt it, then I could realize I didn't have the kindness, this true kindness. So I think actually we know when we're skipping one of these gates, even if we have some sort of righteousness when we say it. I think it just takes some time. I think we need to practice it maybe for a year or so, and then you get closer and closer to this, because it's true, like Ram said, we do all these tricks. Oh, I'm right about this. I'm so kind. I'll just give you a message now, which will help you. But somewhere in that, this kindness disappears, and also once in a while, the truth also is, so it's an interesting observation,
Indeed.
which I also had about myself and others, for that matter.
Truly. You have any thoughts to contribute, Maribel? Please do. This is an ongoing exchange.
Thank you. I don't know. I'm thinking because a lot of time in my case is I speak, but sometimes I am no I how do you say, I don't think first. And then I speak, and then, oh my God, okay, relax. And, I am no conscience, yes, with sometimes with I speak, and then I realize, and sometimes I don't feel good, but I think it's a process, because it's dependent the level of the conscience, but it's good to know how to do that, and don't attack on the other person feel that for you, because sometimes I think I am aggressive when I talk, and oh my God, but I don't know, it depends every person, and just I know, but I am in the process. It's the only I want to
Indeed.
to tell.
Yeah, we're all works in progress, for sure. Ram, you brought up a good point in that depending on who you're talking to and what level of mindfulness they have. So like Maribel was just saying, she says something and then goes, oops. How do we gauge our audience, if you will? In other words, are we filtering what we're contributing to a conversation because of the person we're talking to? Or are we conducting ourselves in a certain fashion no matter who we talk to?
That's a great point. And what I feel, and what my experience is that when somebody comes to you, they come as they are. They don't filter. Some people do filter, and at this point, like sometimes you can smell it, you can taste it, and then whatever. And it's important for them to be as they are. And we have so many types of people in this world that some people are just plain. They speak. The way that they speak could be considered by myself as being aggressive, as Maribel would say. Sometimes I'm aggressive, but this is sometimes the way they speak. And sometimes when they do just confide, and it's so much pressure that it comes out like screaming. So basically on the receiving end, we have to we either have a choice. I think we have a choice, but to say, listen, please speak to me, but don't scream at me. And the person, then we engage into another type of discussion where I'm not screaming, but open it up in another manner, another fashion by saying, are you okay? Like, are you like frustrated? I understand you're frustrated, but because we have also ourselves not to control. I don't want this to be like, as I'm a controlling person, which I am, but I don't want to control. But it's also that we have to manage what we're feeling at the same time. And, if you speak to me, like, I know that if you speak to me at 5 a.m, I will not be very pleasant. But if you speak to me after I've had my first coffee, be it at 5:30, then, it's something else. And I understand that it's not to the other person to get this. It's for me to get this, to understand myself. So that's why it's interesting, because when they come as they are, we should be as we are also. And so the way that it's spoken, it could be very aggressive in tone, but sometimes it could be true and kind, and sometimes it could be kind and beneficial. Whereas, if we put our limits, then this is my limit, stop, and it's not always, I don't want it to seem like we're always happy, because we're not.
Well, yeah.
This is my limit, stop, but I'll listen to you, I'll listen to you anyways. And that's where the taste of the other person comes into play. That's where, I always wondered why we transmigrate, but now I understand it comes into play, because we're not thinking or speaking only about ourselves. We're doing it also for another person, because they came to us, and we did not go say, hey, act like Cal was saying, the savior, hey, come, let me listen to you. I sense that you're frustrated.
I'm a professional listener.
Exactly. So it's a beautiful exercise. It's not always easy.
Indeed.
So I think that the best way is just, if they come as they are, then why can't I be like as I am?
Well, why can't you be as you are anyway?
Exactly.
I mean, if we're looking at this as a path or part of our journey to mindfulness, to being a mindful, conscious individual, we would be working on always wanting to be able to respond truthfully, kindly, supportively. I'm not sure that we want to have a whole separate set of rules to interact with our family members, like for Kala, or interacting with our employer, interacting with Maha. I would think we'd want to be genuine to ourselves, and that expression of ourselves is not dependent upon another person. Part of that is if we're attached to the conversation. This is the subject of the conversation. When I'm having a rather heated conversation with a relative, my spouse, for instance, if he says something that, from my perspective, attacks something I'm attached to. I take care of cleaning the house. What do you mean the house is dirty? How dare you say that about that? You never. I'm attached to what that sentence said. It was a reflection on me. I took it as a personal insult. Instead of not making that my identity, not being attached to whether or not the house is clean or not, whether that's a reflection of my pride, shame issues, I can laugh at somebody saying something, where in the past I would have been very angry and defensive. So this is kind of a multi-layered tiramisu cake here of the way we interact with ourselves, our attachments, our acceptances, our surrenders, as well as the other person that we're speaking to has all their baggage and stuff that they're holding on to and digging through as they get ready to do a response for us. Kind of, guys remember old Rolodexes? They were white index cards that went on a round thing that you could use alphabetically, and it was basically your phone's contact list on paper. But you would be madly calling somebody and flipping through your Rolodex trying to find the reference you needed to talk to this person about. My analogy being that we sometimes spend as much time determining how we need to react to the situation as we put into the response itself. Defending our image, protecting a perspective, defending family members. We find ourselves caught up in the human side of it, the drama, the chaos that we all carry around as being human. So there's an element of forgiveness in this too. We are going to stick our foot in our mouth. We are going to say something stupid. How do we deal with that? How do we work on our forgiveness when we just said so? A woman came up to me when I was at very high weight. I was over 200 pounds at one time. She said, "Oh, good grief, good. What do you do, dear?" I was mortified. She was mortified. But that's another part of this. How do you fix it once you've made the mistake that we're trying to avoid in the first place? Thoughts?
The magical part of this exercise was that now I'm also interacting with the family and friends, and I don't go through the free gates anymore. But they helped me. It became sort of it was a good exercise for me to as a reminder in my interaction. So it's not that I go through gates or same mantras, but it was just in breathing. It became some sort of I could feel actually that the atmosphere, which is normally very fine, became even nicer. Something happened. There happened a shift somehow, like I integrated it, or like a mantra. When we get initiated to mantras, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are part of us somehow. And I totally recognize this forgiveness part also. Integration and forgiveness in the process of doing this things.
Indeed. Do you think of it as an element of forgiving ourselves to be able to forgive others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a mirror, isn't it?
Yeah. In that direction, this kind of a follow up on that, but how do you return to your center? For instance, this is a great personal story. I recognize myself as a control freak. I mean, I came from one of the control freak extraordinaires on this planet, and I did not land far from her tree. I've got amazing skills. But I recognize it. I'm aware of it. Like you were saying about the 3 gates, you don't necessarily go through each gate mentally before you say something, but you breathe that recognition of, Melissa, you're trying to control things again. So in that direction, how do you return yourself when you realize you've just done it again? How do you, what practice or what personal effort do you make? I'm making this a general question for the rest of you. How do you get back to your normal? And for myself, I tend to want to go climb into a hole someplace and hide. But what can we do to recenter ourselves and not end up ruining the conversation or the event or something because of something we said mindlessly?
Well, we could, what we're taught is to breathe. It's very hard. I'm not gonna say it's easy. It's very
I'm holding my breath. I'm sorry.
It's the person is coming at you with a lot of violence or aggressiveness because they just felt something. They just had the situation and they're coming to you, and you need to, bring it bring it down a notch. And how do you do that? I think it's by I guess experience, you know. And at a point, if it's the same person that comes to you like that, then you get to know this person. And you know that they're going to come to you like that. You're like, oh no, I'm not handling this today, you know. Or but I mean, if they come to you, it's for a reason, and until a certain extent, because then it's dependency, and they know that, you know, you're going to listen. At a point they have to be somewhat of autonomous in their stuff. But it's and that was my main question, like, how do you do that? How do you, and can you do it all the time? You know, if you were talking about control, I'm talking about anger. You know, somebody comes up to me with screaming, I'm just gonna burst. I'm gonna defend myself. I'm going to, like, very, very human reaction. So, and that for me, that was hard, because I had to shut up. Basically, I had to stop. And I said, how come I'm doing this and not the other end? And that was another that you have to. But I mean, you know, I don't regret anything today, because, you know, I've learned. But I guess, like, just, you know, breathing and come back to yourself. I think a lot of people, you know, you spoke of Maha, you know, Shivagam. A lot of people tell you to come back to us. We tell people to come back to themselves. Come back to you. Come back to you, because we're outside. When somebody's screaming, you're always thinking, why are they screaming? They're screaming at me. Oh my God, don't they know that I woke up at 5, and don't they know that I didn't,
Right.
and don't know that but it's just to come back to yourself, and that's very hard. One person, Matthew, had told me, listen, just say thank you. Okay, thank you. My first thank yous were not very very much filled with integrity, but I mean, the words were spoken, you know, and then you're like, oh, okay, thank you. You're not feeling well, so you're coming to me. So then, you know, you come back to yourself, and it's very, I'm not going to say it's hard, it's a hardship, whatever, but it's not always easy to do that.
I agree. Would you agree that is harder to do when we feel more attached to the attack? In other words, if somebody out of the blue wanders up on the corner and starts yelling at us, and we have no relationship to them whatsoever, we might be startled, but we don't own anything that they're yelling at us. It's like, you have me confused with someone else. You don't own it. When it's someone you know who comes up and is, there's an attachment there. There's an ownership, a feeling of contributing to something. If we don't own that, if the person comes up yelling at you about you're not having completed something at school, and you know you did, and you know they're in error, is it easier to not take offense, not feel defensive? Is there a place where we can react to people, or not, I should say not react to people, that their chaos does not have to become ours? We don't have to defend ourselves against theirs.
Well, that's a great point, because I mean, it's harder when you do. When your identity is attacked.
Yes, very much harder. Impossible for me.
Yeah, the same. When you're attached to something, of course, you know, what do you mean? You're trying to be nice, but it doesn't always come out that way. Very, very nice and kind, but you're absolutely right. It's easier when you're not attached. It's easier when you're not the one being attacked for something that you did, because we are attached.
Yeah. I think that has a lot to do with mindlessness, is that we're operating on our attachment as opposed to on a mindful consciousness. And that's our challenge each and every time.
And it's our challenge, but we always like take it from, and it's, I mean, I guess it's normal to take it from our point of view, because the person, you know, that's what we hear, and the person might not be saying what we're hearing.
Yes, true.
And that's something else. That's something else, you know. And then we go into shame because, oh, I'm so ashamed that I didn't understand this. But I mean, that's our personal work, I guess, you know, afterwards. Because nothing is what it seems, right? So
Exactly.
it's always our perception of something. But of course, we're attacked. When we feel attacked, we're going to defend.
Indeed. Well, most individuals will if they have the opportunity. I have a curious question in that, Kala, your culture, your society tends to be a little more matter of fact about things. There isn't a lot of drama attached to, no, I love this story. I hope I'm not talking out of school. Rich Diva wanting to stay and you had other obligations and said no. I mean, I'm just like, really? There was no attachment to it. There was no feeling of consequences to it. It was, this is the situation and this is what we have to work with. That's not found in the United States very often. I'm not sure about Canada. And on the other side of it, Maribel, in your culture and in Hispanic, things tend to be a lot more dramatic. Things can be flared up quite a bit more strategically. Now, here's where I'm trying to speak and not cause a problem instead of being true to what it is I'm trying to communicate. So I'm curious, is there skill sets that are also being influenced or affected by just the way we live our lives? In Italy, they answer the phone pronto, which for my definition is hurry up or quick. It's pronto. What? They're in a hurry. It's just, I'm curious if we also have not only our individual journey and experiences and revelations, but also our cultural that are also affecting us, that also, Eckhart Tolle talked about the pain body. He was referring to our cultural or our societal memories. And I was just curious how that affects us in our ability to communicate with people. Did any of that make sense?
Not the last part for me about Eckhart Tolle. What do you mean?
He presents the idea that we have our own memories, our own experiences that affect us. But there is also cultural memory, anthropological memory, a genetic memory that is passed down through the generations. And that was what Eckhart Tolle was trying to reflect in his book, was that genetic memory is also affecting us in addition to us as individual human things on the planet. So I was merely referring to him as an example of how we deal with the genetic memory that we have, that in a more emotional culture, it's expected to be more emotional. Hands are moving. Italians talk with their hands. In other cultures, there is less emotion involved. But I was offering that that's another layer that influences how we remain mindful or find our mindfulness. And I was putting that question back out to see if you guys had any thoughts back to that. Didn't come out very well, but it was a try.
A little example from Scandinavian countries is that on the surface, it can seem like people are not emotional. But I think they are quite emotional. It's just covered up. So I think people from outside cannot sense and see the emotions going on. But us Scandinavians know just by one little fine remark, not being said with an angry voice or anything, we know, all right, this person is offended, this person is sensitive today, this person is angry, but we are not raising the voice. It's just said nice and quiet. And I don't think people from Italy would ever guess that the person was angry at the moment. So it's also interesting.
Why is that? I mean, that's a very open-ended question, but why so much control? Is that a valid
it's very European, first of all, I think. And then when you get closer to Scandinavian countries, it's also something about not bothering other people with your emotions. You are trespassing when you're yelling at people. You're trespassing if you're too sort of, I got offended. So people should guess that you are offended now, and then you'll just leave it up to fate. Will they guess it or not? And you'll just go along the road being offended. I think that could also be part of it.
Interesting. Interesting. I spoke to a fellow in Britain, and his comment was, "Is they're constantly afraid of offending somebody.
Exactly.
Constantly,
Exactly.
everything
Yeah.
about their life is this constant fear that they're going to find by accident offend somebody."
What will the other people say?
Yeah. How will other people react? The United States tends to not worry too much about what anybody else wants to say. Rather a bunch of loudmouths around here, I'm afraid. Well, in that direction, been an interesting conversation. I thought we might take a look at the guided meditation as a closer, depending upon anything else anyone else had to offer. Maribel, if you had anything further you wanted to contribute?
Only I am thinking about here in Mexico is is very different. For Carla, for example, she say that in her country. In general, I think here is more the people more emotional and attack and feel offensive if there is something in the they say they that things personal some more and more time, and yes, it's more aggressive too, and sometimes go for the hit golpes, yeah.
Yeah, get violent.
But depending the yes, but depend I think within the I don't know. It's difficult. That's for general is that, and I was what you told about also the Eckhart told. Yes, Eckhart. I was thinking about Carl Jung and say this. He said something about the collective. I don't know. It's I don't remember very well the name. It's something about collective, the conciencia colectiva. Something. It's Carl Jung, but I think it's enable for the family too, because sometimes here in my family is sometimes speak with screen gritan.
Yeah.
And then I don't feel good, and sometimes I scream to my daughter, and oh my god, the pain. It's like circles, small, and then more big, and then to the country. And just,
yeah, you're right.
But
yeah,
it's yes.
That does lend an interesting contribution to communicating. If you think of it like layers of an onion, we're dealing with ourselves and talking with ourselves, our own self-speak. Whether we're talking to ourselves positively, whether we're controlling ourselves, whether we're disappointed. Then we have our family and our friends as another layer that are guiding us and kind of showing us what's acceptable amongst the group. Then you have your society and culture, your economy, and your religions in there. You've got your politics in there. It just keeps building out to a very large-sized onion with a lot of influences to us at the center. I think focusing on being able to do the 3 gates or the think to pay attention to what we're saying is a great grounding tool, a reminder that we return to the idea. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? those are such a simple trilogy. And as Kala says, it doesn't take long for you to breathe in and have those 3 questions pass through your mind before you breathe out what you're going to say. So it's a very lovely way, a concise, efficient way to help us move ourselves to being true to ourselves, regardless who or where or what we're talking about. So in that direction, I thought we might see about closing out with Kala giving us a guided meditation where we have the opportunity to reflect on a good communication with someone and a not so good communication with someone. So if you're up for that, Kala, I was going to hand it over to you.
All right, ladies. So take a deep breath and close your eyes and pay attention to your bodies. I want you to start slowly getting closer to a situation with somebody. It can be at the moment or it can be in the past. Not just an everyday experience, but a situation where you maybe had an argument. Maybe you were trying to teach somebody some lessons or show them a better way to do things. Maybe somebody said something which hurt you, or you said something which hurt the other person. So take a moment and try and get closer to a situation like this. Breathe. It can be this situation as something you regret, or it can be an upcoming situation you are worried about, or a situation you are in right now. Maybe it's with a person you care deeply about, or with a situation with a person which something is at stake. Maybe it's at your work or somewhere else. Something important to you. Breathe. Try and go to the situation now the way you want to go to it and feel what is going on. If it was in the past, maybe it became an argument or you said some things you regretted, try and go to this feeling and breathe it in. Take a deep breath. If it's a situation right now, you also go and breathe into this feeling. Now try and imagine the same situation. Maybe it's in the past, maybe it's now, or something in the future which you worry about. And you try and ask yourself, is what I'm saying right now really true? True in the sense that it feels true. Not universally true, but it's an honest and true thing maybe you want to tell somebody at the moment. Breathe. Next, ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to say or deliver a message about, is it kind? Is it kind in the way so you can feel that the person in front of you feels it like kindness? And you try and breathe in that feeling a little bit now. will this message be received as kindness from the other person or other people you're interacting with? Can you breathe? The last thing you ask yourself at the moment, in the argument, in the conversation or situation with one or many people you're thinking about at the moment, is what you're about to say really necessary? Is it really necessary in the sense that will the people you're talking to at the moment be able to quite fine by themselves to solve their problems, their situation? Is it really necessary for you to speak about it, to say something about it at the moment? And you breathe on that question. You can try a last time to go briefly through the 3 questions again. Is it true? Is it kind? And is it necessary? Breathe. When you're ready, you just slowly come back to yourself and open your eyes.
That was nice, Kala. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I can see an element of developing compassion with this practice as well. Being able to identify those places where you can step in and do something productive beyond a mustard seed. Those times when only a mustard seed is going to be the best you can do, and in other cases where you just observe. And you're okay with that. You don't have to, as you say. Is it really necessary that you have to say something? So it's a real good way of reflecting on how attached we are to the conversation and how attached we are to our role in the conversation. Well done. Thank you, Kala. Good job. Any other thoughts before we close out today? All right. How about thoughts about what we've done? Any feedback in terms of making this more of a casual exchange than a class? Don't all answer at once.
Well, I think this is fun.
I liked it. You're very welcome, Maribel. Very welcome. I wanted to mention real quick, completely off topic, but not. I really enjoy your postings, Maribel, what you put up on Facebook. I really enjoy those with your math and the history of women. And it's just, I love it. Keep it up. Good work. All right. Well, we'll conclude this then as our first attempt at a podcast for Our Lady Sangha. And I thank all of you for joining us today. And I will have this available as a YouTube video. I'm not necessarily going to make it public just yet, but I'll make sure we all have a link to it. And I would appreciate your feedback if you have a chance to take a peek at it and let me know your thoughts on it, whether we need to change how we do the screens for the recording, the format, whether, one person needs to talk less or more. However you have your feedback on that, I'd appreciate it. So I'll get you the links when we're done. Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much for your time and your attention, your energy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy the rest of what you have of your day. Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye.